In a quiet corner of the galaxy, far from the big trade routes and the noise of great empires, there was a small market station floating near the blue rings of a gas giant. The place wasn't famous. Ships came there to trade food, metals, and small tools. It was a peaceful place where no one expected history to happen. Among the many traders who lived there was a small alien merchant named Tech. He wasn't rich or powerful. He sold spare parts and old ship equipment to travelers who needed repairs. He had worked there for years, quietly and politely, without ever getting involved in politics or big matters. That day, the station was unusually busy. A human diplomat had arrived on a routine visit, one of the rare human representatives who traveled alone without a large escort. Humans didn't come to this part of space often, and when they did, everyone noticed. Some admired them. Others whispered about their strange reputation. Humanity was known as unpredictable, peaceful one moment, unstoppable the next. Tech had seen humans before, but only from a distance. They always carried themselves with a quiet kind of confidence. There was something about their eyes that made other species hesitate, like they had seen too much, survived too much. This diplomat was no different. Calm, friendly, and focused, the human spoke kindly to those around him and treated everyone as equals. Then it happened. It started with a sound, something small, like a glass breaking. Tech turned his head confused. A moment later, the air filled with shouting. A figure dressed in dark armor pushed through the crowd, holding a small weapon glowing red at its tip. It all happened in seconds. The weapon fired. Tech didn't think. He didn't plan. He just moved. His body reacted before his mind did. He jumped forward, pulling the human down behind a market stall. The energy bolt flew past and hit a metal wall, leaving a burning hole where the diplomat's head had been. The crowd screamed. Security drones rushed in. The attacker tried to flee, but before he could escape, station guards surrounded him. The noise faded slowly, replaced by the heavy breathing of those who had survived the chaos. Tech looked down. The human was staring up at him, wide-eyed, shocked but alive. A second later, the diplomat smiled. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice steady despite everything. Tech blinked, unsure what to say. It was just instinct, he thought. Anyone would have done it. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would risk their life for someone from another world. Especially not for a human. News of the attack spread fast. The story of a small alien saving a human diplomat from assassination reached every major news channel across the known sectors. For a moment, the galaxy united in praise. It was a beautiful story, proof that peace and friendship between species could still exist. But that peace didn't last long. While most people saw it as a story of hope, others saw it as something dangerous. Some worlds had always feared humanity's potential power. They said Earth was too quiet, too patient, and that when it finally acted, it did so with terrifying precision. When the broadcast reached Earth, the human world paused. The image of the injured diplomat being helped by a small alien was shown everywhere. On every screen, every feed, every broadcast tower. People stopped working. Soldiers stopped training. Families at dinner tables turned their heads toward the screen. The story hit them hard. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something deeper. To humans, loyalty wasn't just a word. It was sacred. If someone risked their life for one of them, they owed a debt that could never be forgotten. Within hours, strange things began to happen. On the trade station, Tech received unexpected visitors. They weren't soldiers, but quiet officials dressed in black suits. They thanked him formally and gave him a small device, a communication unit linked directly to Earth's embassy network. They told him that if he ever needed help anywhere, anytime, he only had to press one button. At first, Tech didn't understand the meaning of this gesture. He thought it was a kind of ceremonial gift. But far away in Earth's highest command centers, discussions were already happening. The rescue of a human, by a non-human, was more than a diplomatic event. It was personal. And when something became personal to humanity, it always changed the game. Tech tried to return to his normal life. But normal was gone. Every customer who entered his shop looked at him differently. Some with admiration, others with fear. He received endless messages. Some congratulated him. Others warned him to stay quiet. One message simply read, "Do you understand what you've done? Days passed, but the galaxy could not stop talking about it. The attacker was revealed to belong to a radical group that hated human influence in galactic affairs. That group had never been taken seriously before. Now, everyone realized they had made a mistake. Meanwhile, in the shadows of deep space, something began to move. Unmanned probes launched from Earth. Recon fleets changed their routes. Human military stations across several sectors quietly shifted into alert status. Nothing official was said, but the signals were clear to anyone who could read between the lines. Earth was watching. Closely. The first sign came when the Galactic Council tried to calm the situation. They released a statement thanking Raltech for his bravery and promising justice, but their message was followed only an hour later by another transmission, this one directly from Earth. It was short. You touched one of ours. You saved one of ours. From this moment, you are under Earth's protection. No one had heard a message like that before. It wasn't a thank you. It wasn't political. It was a promise. Across the galaxy, the reaction was instant. Some celebrated it, believing it meant stronger unity. Others trembled, understanding what those words truly meant. When humans promised protection, they didn't mean gentle words or treaties. They meant defense, power, and if necessary, war. Haltech, the simple merchant, suddenly found himself at the center of history. Media ships surrounded the station. Crowds gathered outside his small shop. People wanted interviews, pictures, statements. He refused them all. He didn't want fame. He wanted peace. But peace had already left him. A few nights later, he stood by his shop window looking out at the stars. The human diplomat had long since been taken to safety. The station was quiet again, but something in the air had changed. Realtech could feel it, a tension that hadn't been there before. Ships moved faster, conversations were shorter, and everyone seemed to be waiting for something to happen. He looked down at the small communication device the humans had given him. It was simple, one button, one purpose. He wondered if he would ever have to use it. Then he remembered the humans' words after the attack. Thank you. That single moment of connection between two beings, different worlds, different lives, had somehow set the galaxy on edge. In the following days, strange rumors began to spread. Some said human warships were being seen near neutral borders. Others said a massive data signal had been sent from Earth to all its colonies, containing orders that no one outside the human network could read. To the common people of the galaxy, it was confusing. To the leaders, it was terrifying. Because everyone knew one thing about humans: they never fought halfway. But for now, there was no open war, no violence. Just silence, a silence that felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. And through it all, Raltech tried to carry on. He repaired engines, sold parts, smiled at customers. But deep inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had changed something far bigger than himself. One small act of courage, done in a moment of instinct, had awakened something ancient and powerful. A force that had slept for too long. The galaxy had forgotten what it meant for Earth to care about someone. They were about to remember. The story of the rescue kept spreading. Every channel, every data feed, every news circle across the stars carried the same headline: Alien saves human diplomat. For many, it was just another piece of breaking news that would fade in a few days. But on Earth, the story didn't fade. It grew. In the beginning, the reaction was simple. People felt proud that someone out there, beyond their home planet, had seen enough worth in humanity to risk their life for one of them. That kind of loyalty touched something deep inside humans, something they couldn't quite explain. For most species in the galaxy, saving someone was an act of duty. For humans, it was personal. Soon, the story reached every home on Earth. It was shown on massive city screens, talked about by families over dinner, and discussed endlessly by leaders in the highest offices. The video clip, Raltech pulling the human diplomat to safety, was replayed millions of times. People cried, cheered, and felt a wave of emotion they hadn't felt in years. Across continents, a single thought spread quietly but powerfully. Someone out there protected one of us. For the human race, that meant everything. But something else happened too. Something quieter, more serious. In Earth's defense centers, lights turned on in rooms that had been dark for decades. Old communication networks began to hum again. Deep in orbit, satellites that hadn't been used in years started aligning themselves. No one announced anything. No public statement was made. But those who watched closely noticed it. Earth was moving. The first sign came only 2 days after the attack. A strange signal appeared across the galactic networks. A pulse that interrupted every broadcast for exactly 30 seconds. At first, people thought it was a glitch or a system failure, but then the message came through. It was short, simple, delivered in every known language at the same time. You touched one of ours. You saved one of ours. From this moment, you are under Earth's protection. That was it. No signature, no flag, no threat. Just a message that hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Across the galaxy, silence followed. No one knew what to make of it. The smaller worlds felt comforted. Maybe Earth was offering safety to those who believed in peace. But the powerful empires felt something else entirely. Fear, because they knew what those words truly meant. For centuries, humanity had kept a strange reputation. They were friendly, curious, and endlessly patient. But behind that patience was something hard and unshakable, a promise that they never left their own behind. When Earth said ours, it wasn't about ownership. It was about protection. Every major power began holding secret meetings. Some called it a kind gesture, others called it a declaration. But no one could agree on how to respond. Meanwhile, life for Realtek changed completely. He received endless messages, not just from humans, but from many species. Some thanked him, some warned him, and some asked if he truly believed that Earth's protection was real. Realtek didn't know how to answer. All he knew was that, since the day of the attack, his life had never been the same. Then one morning, a small human ship arrived at the station. It wasn't military, just a simple diplomatic transport. 3 humans stepped out, dressed in plain uniforms, carrying no weapons. They asked for Realtek. When they met, they bowed politely and thanked him again. Then they handed him a small box made of smooth black metal. Inside it was a badge with a symbol that no one in that part of space had ever seen before, a blue earth with a silver ring around it. The lead human explained softly, "You are now under Earth's protection. No one touches you. No one harms you. If anyone does, they answer to us." Realtek stood there in silence, unsure what to say. The human continued, "You saved one of us. That means from now on you are one of us." That sentence would echo through history. When the humans left the station, everyone stared, some in awe, some in anger. In the following hours, galactic networks filled with arguments. Some said Earth was showing gratitude. Others said it was trying to expand influence by fear. But back on Earth, something far deeper was happening. People began to share stories. Stories of the past, of times when humanity had stood together no matter the cost. They remembered old wars, old sacrifices, and the times when humans had fought not for power, but for loyalty. A quiet determination spread like wildfire. In schools, teachers spoke about the event as a moment of honor. In the streets, murals appeared showing the small alien saving the human diplomat, painted with the words, "One act, one bond." For the first time in a long time, humanity felt united, not against anyone, but for something. They weren't preparing for revenge. They were preparing for responsibility. But outside Earth, not everyone saw it that way. On several planets, military scouts started tracking human fleet movements. They noticed that ships once stationed far from the borders were now quietly being repositioned near trade routes and council-controlled zones. No public reason was given, but anyone who knew human history understood what was happening. Earth wasn't attacking anyone. It was warning everyone. In the Galactic Council, the mood turned tense. The council held an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered, trying to decide how to handle what they now called the Earth message. Some argued that it was harmless, just symbolic. Others warned that if Earth was serious, it could shift the entire balance of power. The council had seen human wars before. They knew that when humans said enough, the universe usually listened. One council member stood and said, "If they are truly placing one alien under their protection, then this is more than politics. It's a statement of principle, and principles are dangerous." In the following days, reports started coming in of human intelligence ships appearing near regions where the radical group that had attacked the diplomat once operated. They weren't attacking, just watching, but everyone could feel the pressure building. Back on the station, Raltek tried to keep to himself. He still ran his shop, still greeted customers politely, but the stares never stopped. Some treated him like a hero. Others treated him like a curse. Rumors began that his presence could bring human warships if anyone dared harm him. Even the station authorities became nervous. They offered him relocation, even protection under their own forces. But he refused. He didn't want to leave. He didn't believe Earth would go to war just for him. He told himself, "I'm just a traitor. I only did what was right." But deep down he knew things had changed too much for life to ever go back. Then, one night it happened again. A short broadcast appeared across galactic channels. Not an official one, but a faint signal believed to be from a private human transmission. It simply said, "If he is touched, we act." 3 seconds long. That was all it took to make half the galaxy nervous. In the weeks that followed, some planets banned human ships from entering. Others sent quiet messages of alliance. The balance of power that had lasted for centuries began to shift. And it all started with one small rescue, a simple act of compassion that no one had expected to matter. And through all of it, humanity remained silent. No interviews, no explanations, no speeches. Only that single message still echoed across space, replayed again and again. "You touched one of ours. You saved one of ours. From this moment, you are under Earth's protection." To outsiders, it sounded like a line of gratitude, but to anyone who truly understood humanity, it was a promise. A promise that if even one person was willing to risk their life for a human, then Earth would move mountains to protect them. It was loyalty, pure, simple, and terrifyingly powerful. And the galaxy was just beginning to realize what that really meant. The message from Earth had traveled faster than anyone expected. Across the galaxy, every major system received it at almost the same moment. "You touched one of ours. You saved one of ours. From this moment, you are under Earth's protection." For most ordinary beings, it sounded like a promise of help or a diplomatic statement. But in the halls of the Galactic Council, it was received very differently. The chamber was vast, far larger than any human city, with high ceilings that reflected holograms of distant stars. Delegates from dozens of civilizations sat together in a mix of anxiety and disbelief. Some species were small and fragile-looking, others massive and armored, and a few had forms that were almost incomprehensible to human eyes. Despite their differences, every one of them felt the same tension. They had heard the message. They had understood it. And for the first time in centuries, all of them feared the humans, not for their words, but for the history behind them. The debate began quietly, almost politely. A counselor from a planet known for trade and diplomacy spoke first. "This could be a gesture of goodwill," they said. "We should not overreact. Perhaps Earth simply wants to show gratitude to a being who acted courageously." Another counselor, taller and with skin like molten metal, shook their massive head. "Gratitude is not enough to explain this. Humans have a record of protecting what they consider theirs. We have seen it before. When provoked, they respond swiftly and decisively. This is not a simple act of thanks." Murmurs spread through the chamber. For many, the idea that Earth could act across light years to protect a single individual was terrifying. Even the calmest species recognized that humans were patient, methodical, and remarkably resourceful. Their patience often masked power that other civilizations could not comprehend. A smaller delegate, a species with many eyes and delicate limbs, whispered to a neighbor, "Do you understand? If they meant every word, we are dealing with something unprecedented." Others didn't whisper. They raised voices. "We cannot allow one alien merchant's action to dictate the future of interstellar diplomacy." One of them shouted, "If Earth will protect anyone who aids their people, then every conflict, every attack, every decision could be influenced by fear of retaliation." The room grew tense. Holograms displayed the rescue scene again. Raltek pulling the human diplomat behind a metal stall as the weapon fired past. Some counselors winced. Others clenched their hands. Many had never seen a human's willingness to face danger for others captured so clearly. One of the oldest counselors, from a species that had survived countless wars, leaned forward. Their voice was calm but carried weight. "Let us not confuse action with threat. Humans have long been observers of the galaxy, patient even when wronged. But make no mistake, the moment someone crosses a line or harms those they care for, they act. And when they act, the results are absolute. This is not conjecture. History proves it." Another counselor rose, visibly upset. Are we to treat every human as untouchable? Are we to fear them into submission because of one rescue? The elder counselor's gaze swept the room. Fear is not the proper word. Respect, perhaps, understanding. The humans have lived through countless catastrophes, countless betrayals, countless losses. They have survived because they value loyalty above all. One act of loyalty, one small gesture, does not invite war. It demands consideration. Outside the chamber, fleets and patrols waited quietly. The Council's actions, their decisions, would ripple outward instantly. The balance of power that had been stable for centuries now shifted with the knowledge of Earth's potential. Some members of the Council had already begun quietly reinforcing their own borders, anticipating a human response that might never come, but could come at any time. The debate dragged on for hours. Delegates argued over intentions, possibilities, and probabilities. Some tried to dismiss it as a symbolic act. Others analyzed human history, recalling wars, defenses, and strategies that stretched across centuries. Each remembered the countless times humanity had appeared calm and patient while quietly, preparing for challenges that other civilizations would consider insurmountable. A young delegate from a small moon attempted to calm the room. Perhaps we should consider this from the perspective of peace. Perhaps the humans simply wish to convey a message of unity, that loyalty will not go unnoticed. The elder counselor shook their head. You underestimate the depth of human conviction. Loyalty is not symbolic to them. It is action, and action is measured, deliberate, and often final. Remember, they do not act for glory. They act because it is right. They act because promises, spoken or unspoken, matter to them. In that moment, the holograms flickered, showing Raal Tech again, holding the human diplomat's hand as they were escorted away. The counselors couldn't help but notice the calm in the human's eyes. They had faced danger, survived it, and now relied completely on the alien who had risked everything to save them. The bond was simple. The bond was profound. It was this simplicity that terrified the council. Across generations, they had learned to calculate threats, to plan defenses, to manipulate alliances. But the humans operated on something older, more instinctive, a commitment to those who act for others, without hesitation. Some of the counselors argued that Earth's message could destabilize every alliance. If any being in the galaxy comes to their aid, Earth intervenes, one argued. What prevents anyone from exploiting this? What prevents a cascade of conflicts because of one perceived offense? Others disagreed. It is not exploitation if the humans act according to their principles. They are not swayed by politics or power. They are swayed by loyalty and fairness. This is not a weapon. It is a law of nature enforced through action. The debate went on late into the galactic cycle. Members stood, sat, paced, and gestured wildly. Outside the chamber, silence covered the stars. Trade routes continued. Fleets moved quietly, watching, waiting. Everyone knew that the humans had made a promise, but no one knew how or when it would be enforced. Finally, a quiet voice, almost forgotten in the noise, spoke from the back of the chamber. It belonged to a delegate from an ancient system, one that had experienced countless wars and betrayals. We have underestimated humans for centuries. We thought patience was weakness. We thought observation was indifference. We were wrong. Humans act not from fear, not from ambition, but from principle. And principle is not a thing to bargain with. It cannot be bribed. It cannot be deceived. It must be respected. The council fell silent. No one disagreed, though many struggled to accept it. They had not yet experienced the full extent of Earth's response. They had only seen the message and the history, yet even that was enough to make the weight of the moment clear. As the council deliberated, Raal Tech remained unaware of the full scope of the debate. He continued his quiet life on the station, unaware that the galaxy's leaders were discussing his actions as if they had triggered a tectonic shift. The reality was that one small act of courage had forced every species to consider the power and unpredictability of Earth. The discussion continued for cycles, with no final conclusion. Some counselors called for caution, others for diplomacy, and a few for preemptive measures. Yet beneath every word, a quiet understanding had formed. Humans were not bluffing. They might be patient, but their patience had limits, and anyone who interfered with that principle, intentionally or not, could face consequences beyond imagination. As the meeting ended, the council agreed to monitor the situation closely. No one dared underestimate the humans again. Even those who had once dismissed Earth as a minor power realized that this was different. This was a force guided by loyalty, by principle, by a willingness to act when words alone would not suffice. Outside, fleets moved silently. Communication lines were watched. Intelligence probes scanned sectors. Every species understood that the rescue had changed the rules of engagement. What had begun as a single act of courage by one alien merchant had now become a matter of interstellar law, unwritten but understood. If you touch a human, you answer to Earth. And in the quiet of his small shop, Raltek continued his life as if nothing had changed, unaware that the galaxy now revolved around the message he had helped deliver. The debate in the council had set the stage for what was to come, a stage where patience, loyalty, and courage would determine the balance of the universe. One simple act had awakened something that no one could ignore, no one could predict, and no one could control. The galaxy had learned a single, undeniable truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. Their patience might last centuries. Their actions might be deliberate, but when they acted for something far greater than power or politics. They acted for loyalty. And loyalty, as the council was beginning to understand, could move stars. After the council debate, the galaxy seemed to settle, but the calm was only on the surface. Far beyond the brightly lit hubs of trade and diplomacy, fleets and signals began to shift quietly. No announcements were made, no alarms were sounded, but the movement was unmistakable. Something had changed, and everyone who could read the signs knew it. On Earth, the reaction was deliberate and measured. The leadership did not call for war, nor did they issue threats. They did not need to. The message had already been sent. Anyone who interfered with the life of someone who acted for humanity would face the consequences. Every system in the galaxy had received that message one way or another. But for the humans, the work had only begun. Every fleet, every satellite, every intelligence probe was quietly activated. Ships that had been stationed near far-off planets were repositioned closer to key trade routes, strategic choke points, and regions where old conflicts still lingered. Communication arrays that had been idle for decades were brought online, not to broadcast messages but to monitor. The humans did not attack. They observed. They calculated. They prepared. This movement was subtle, invisible to most. The common citizens of other worlds noticed little, only the occasional increase in patrols or the sudden appearance of new ships in their skies. To them it was unsettling but not alarming. To those who understood human history, it was terrifying. History books recorded humanity as a species that valued life, but also as a species that acted decisively when loyalty or justice demanded it. They were patient but not passive. They were deliberate but not weak. And now, the galaxy was beginning to see what that meant. The radical group that had attacked the diplomat had long considered themselves untouchable. They had operated in shadows hidden in remote sectors, striking at anyone who interfered with their goals. But now their entire existence was threatened, not by immediate attack but by observation. Human reconnaissance fleets silently watched their bases, tracking movements, noting weapons shipments, and monitoring communications. Every message, every transaction, every small action was catalogued. It was a warning without words. Raltek, unaware of the full scope of the operation, noticed small signs of change around him. His neighbors whispered, and some avoided him entirely. Customers entered his shop with cautious smiles, glancing around as if expecting trouble. Even the local authorities seemed uneasy, offering assistance that he politely refused. Nothing had happened directly to him, but the air had changed. He could feel it. Meanwhile, in far-off regions of the galaxy, other powers took notice. Systems that had long tolerated piracy or political manipulation suddenly tightened their borders. Trade hubs were reorganized. Communications were rerouted. Some councils issued quiet advisories to their citizens. Be careful where you travel. Earth is watching. The movement was everywhere but invisible. It was in the rearrangement of fleets, the silent alerts sent through channels, the small adjustments in patrol patterns. It was in the shadows, and it was meant to be seen by those who dared to challenge human resolve. Raltek's life continued quietly, though not unchanged. The humans who had given him the protection device visited occasionally, checking on him, offering guidance and reminding him that he was never alone. Their presence was subtle but unmistakable. It was the kind of support that could not be ignored, the kind of reassurance that left a permanent mark. Other species noticed too. Small traders, merchants, and travelers who had once moved freely began to think twice about where they went and what they did. The knowledge that Earth was willing to intervene, even quietly, even without immediate action, spread like ripples across the galaxy. Some worlds tried to respond. They called secret meetings, debated strategies, and sent messages of concern or protest, but the humans were patient. They did not respond with anger. They did not escalate. They waited. Their quiet movement, precise and deliberate, was more intimidating than any open display of force. In the meantime, Rahal Tech observed the small changes on the station. Patrol drones were slightly different. Shipping schedules were subtly altered. There was no explanation, no warning, no reason given. Yet every adjustment carried a message. Things were being watched, monitored, and controlled. One day, a small group of humans arrived at the station again. Not soldiers, but envoys. They spoke with local officials and traders, offering assistance and technical advice. They did not demand recognition or gratitude, but their presence alone sent a clear signal. Humanity's influence was subtle, precise, and undeniable. The radical group that had attacked the diplomat felt the pressure long before any confrontation. Their communications were disrupted. Their shipments were delayed or intercepted. Small attacks against them were foiled before they could begin. The humans did not announce themselves. They did not declare war. They moved like a shadow, quiet and relentless. Every action had meaning. Every observation carried weight. And through it all, Raltech remained the small figure at the center of it, unaware that his single act of courage had triggered a response that stretched across star systems and fleets. The movement of shadows extended further than anyone imagined. Allies of the radical group grew nervous. Systems that had tolerated their presence suddenly began to distance themselves, offering assurances of neutrality or cooperation with Earth. The ripple effect was enormous, subtle but powerful. Even the Galactic Council, still debating the implications of the Earth message, noticed the changes. Fleets moved silently. Borders shifted. Trade routes were reorganized. Intelligence networks buzzed with information that didn't quite make sense unless one understood human strategy. Humans were not aggressive, but they were watching. They were not threatening, but they were preparing. And the galaxy could feel it. Back at the station, Realtek continued his life, repairing engines, selling parts, and interacting with travelers. He noticed the subtle respect in the way customers treated him. Some seemed to avoid him, perhaps out of fear. Others treated him with admiration or even awe. He did not understand fully, but he felt the change. One evening, a quiet message arrived for him via the device given by the human envoys. It simply read, "You are safe. Continue your life. Watch and learn. The galaxy is changing." Realtek stared at it, realizing that safety was more than just protection. It was influence. It was presence. It was a reminder that one act of courage could move forces far beyond his understanding. The station continued to operate normally, yet the undercurrent of change was unmistakable. Ships moved with greater precision. Security measures tightened silently, and everywhere the shadow of humanity stretched. Not openly, but subtly, like an invisible hand guiding events from afar. Travelers whispered of ships appearing where none should be, of communications intercepted and redirected. The radical group, sensing the pressure, became paranoid and hesitant. They no longer acted boldly. Every move was calculated, second-guessed, and ultimately restrained. The galaxy had begun to understand a truth that was simple yet profound. Humans did not need to threaten with words, nor did they need to attack to demonstrate power. Their presence alone, their vigilance, and their unwavering loyalty were enough to shift the balance. Raltek often sat quietly at night, looking at the stars, reflecting on how one small act had caused all of this. He did not feel powerful or important. He only felt grateful to have been able to act when it mattered. And yet, unknowingly, his courage had sparked a chain of events that would be remembered across galaxies. In the shadows, fleets moved, signals transmitted, and eyes watched. Humanity had made its mark not with war but with principle, and the movement of shadows was just the beginning. The galaxy was changing, slowly, silently, inexorably, And at the heart of it was a simple truth. When humans choose to act for loyalty, for justice, for life, the universe listens. Even now, in the quiet corners of space, the ripple spread. Systems far from the station began to adjust policies, move fleets, and reconsider alliances. Traders hesitated before making risky moves. Leaders thought twice before ignoring or threatening any individual. Earth's influence was invisible yet undeniable, and the message was clear. Anyone who touched a human or those who acted to protect them would find themselves in the path of an unstoppable force. And all of it had begun with one alien reaching out, one human being saved, and one small act of courage that no one could forget. The galaxy had begun to feel different, though most of its inhabitants couldn't put their finger on why. Fleets moved silently, messages were intercepted, and borders seemed more fortified than ever. Yet no open war had started. No one fired a single shot. The change was invisible but undeniable. Realtek, the small alien merchant at the heart of it all, went about his life as usual. He repaired engines, sold spare parts, and greeted travelers with polite smiles. But he could feel the tension. There was something in the air, a quiet weight that pressed down without explanation. Some visitors approached him cautiously, as though being near him might bring trouble. Others glanced around nervously, checking the skies as if expecting human ships to appear at any moment. He did not understand it, but he knew something had shifted. Then one day, the event that would be remembered as the spark that no one dared fan began quietly, almost unnoticeably. A group of rival aliens, members of the same radical organization that had attacked the human diplomat, attempted to capture Realtek. They claimed it was for questioning, to learn why he had interfered and why he had saved the human. They came in the middle of the night, moving silently through shadow corridors, avoiding station security as much as they could. They had calculated every risk, believing that humanity would not act immediately. They believed that one small alien could be taken without consequence. They were wrong. Realtek had no idea they were coming. He was asleep in his small quarters above the shop when alarms suddenly blared. He bolted upright, confusion and fear racing through him. Before he could react, the intruders were inside, their weapons drawn, faces hidden behind dark masks. He tried to reason with them, to explain that he had acted only to save a life, that he meant no harm to anyone. They ignored him, confident in their advantage. In their calculations, Earth would not intervene. They had underestimated humans. Outside the station, sensors had already detected the intrusion. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, human fleets began to move. Small reconnaissance ships appeared near the station, their engines hidden, their movements precise. No attack had been ordered. No warning was sent. They simply positioned themselves in the shadows ready, and then it happened. Within 12 minutes, the intruders' plan was completely undone. Systems they relied on were suddenly disabled. Communications failed. Small ships they had called in vanished from the sensors. In moments, the intruders found themselves surrounded by a force they could not see, a force they could not understand, and a force they could not resist. When the dust settled, not one human had fired a shot. Not one ship had crossed the station's perimeter visibly, and yet every member of the group had been neutralized. The station remained intact. Realtek was safe, and the intruders were gone, vaporized or otherwise incapacitated. No one knew exactly how, and no one dared investigate too closely. The news of what had happened spread faster than anyone could have imagined. Traders and travelers carried the story from station to station, whispering in corridors and market halls. Across the galaxy, leaders and civilians alike reacted in disbelief. How had such a small act of intervention been so complete? How could humans act without showing themselves, yet accomplish everything? The message was clear. No one dared provoke humanity, and no one dared test their patience. At the council, the reaction was immediate and intense. Delegates called emergency sessions, reviewing every detail available from the sensors and transmissions. Some wanted to demand explanations, to challenge Earth for the sudden and unexplained action. Others simply sat in silence, their faces pale, recognizing that the humans had demonstrated an entirely new level of capability. The elder counselor from the ancient system spoke first. "This is not war," they said, voice calm but firm. "This is a message, a demonstration. They are telling the galaxy that any action against one of theirs or those they protect will be met with absolute consequences, and it will happen before we even see it coming. Across the chamber, murmurs filled the air. Some delegates whispered urgently to one another. Others clenched their fists, visibly disturbed. The truth was simple. The humans had changed the rules of engagement. They had not announced war, yet they had ensured that anyone who dared challenge them would pay an immediate price. Meanwhile, Raltek could only watch as his life shifted yet again. The station felt different. Travelers treated him differently. Some avoided him entirely. Others looked at him with a mixture of awe and fear. He did not know whether to feel proud, guilty, or simply bewildered. All he knew was that his single act, saving a human life, had set the galaxy on edge. News of the event reached systems far beyond the station. Trade routes were adjusted, fleets repositioned. Some planetary governments quietly offered assurances to Earth, declaring neutrality or cooperation. Others prepared for worst-case scenarios, unsure what humanity's next step would be. Back on Earth, the operation was studied in real time by leaders, strategists, and advisors. No one celebrated, no one claimed glory. They simply observed, ensuring that the human response was precise, controlled, and effective. For humans, the goal was never revenge or fear. It was protection. They would act for loyalty, for justice, for life itself, and that action would be total, immediate, and unquestionable. The galaxy had begun to learn something fundamental about humanity. They did not need to declare war to be feared. They did not need to speak loudly to be understood. Their principles alone, loyalty, courage, protection, were enough to shift the balance of power. The radical group, which had thought themselves clever and untouchable, now found themselves in hiding. Every movement, every attempt at communication, every plan was scrutinized. They could not escape the reach of humans, even without visible fleets or attacks. Every system they had once considered safe was now under observation. Raltek often reflected on this quietly. He would look at the stars and marvel at how one small decision had changed everything. He had acted instinctively out of compassion. He had not considered consequences beyond the immediate moment. And yet that single act had altered alliances, shifted power, and reminded the galaxy that humans were not a force to underestimate. The movement of shadows, of quiet fleets and unseen observers, continued. Humans did not speak, did not act openly, but the galaxy felt their presence everywhere. Systems realigned. Trade adjusted. Fleets shifted. The ripple of one act of courage had become a wave felt across light years. Even the Council realized that further conflict would be risky. Every calculation, every analysis, every projection now had to account for humans. The message was unmistakable. The humans would act, and when they did, their action would be absolute. Yet, despite all this, life continued. Markets still thrived, traders still traveled, and systems still negotiated. Humans did not invade. They did not attack. They simply moved in the shadows, ensuring that loyalty and courage were respected, and that anyone who dared test humanity learned the cost of underestimating them. For Raltek, it was a strange time. He continued his quiet life, repairing engines, selling parts, and interacting with travelers. He did not seek attention or recognition. He did not desire fame. All he wanted was to live in peace, yet peace had been forever altered by his own actions. He realized that courage was not always about battle or conflict. Sometimes it was about small decisions, simple acts of loyalty, and choosing to do what was right in the moment. Those decisions could ripple far beyond what anyone imagined, altering the course of lives, systems, and even entire galaxies. The galaxy had felt the spark, and no one dared fan it, because everyone knew deep down what the humans had shown. Loyalty and protection were not just words. They were principles enforced with precision, patience, and power, and those who dared ignore them did so at their own risk. Raltek continued to live quietly, but the universe had already begun to change. Every fleet, every council, every radical group understood that one act of courage, one human life saved, was enough to make the galaxy respect and fear the unseen hand of humanity. And that spark, small and unassuming though it seemed, had ignited a force that no one could ignore. After the events that had shaken the galaxy, a new reality began to emerge, one that no one had expected, and one that would last for generations. The small act of courage by Raltek, saving a human diplomat, had set in motion forces that changed not only individuals, but entire systems and civilizations. The galaxy now understood a truth that was simple, yet impossible to ignore. Humans did not act for power or conquest, but for loyalty, protection, and principle. For Raltek, life had returned to a cautious normal. He continued repairing engines and selling parts, greeting travelers and traders with polite smiles. Yet the station had changed, and so had the eyes of everyone who passed through. Some looked at him with respect, knowing that the invisible hand of humanity now protected him. Others looked with fear, uncertain how much power or influence this small alien had accidentally attracted. News spread quickly of the humans' subtle actions, the movement of fleets, the surveillance of old threats, and the quiet neutralization of dangerous groups. Across the galaxy, systems began to adjust. Trade routes shifted. Borders were reinforced. Political alliances were reconsidered. Every leader knew that any attack on a human, or those connected to humans, would bring consequences too swift and precise to ignore. It was not war. It was not invasion. It was a new rule, unwritten but universal: loyalty to humanity, and humanity's protection of those who acted for them was absolute. The Galactic Council, which had spent cycles debating the implications of the Earth message and the actions that followed, now recognized that it had to adapt. Discussions that once focused on diplomacy, trade, and territorial disputes were now overshadowed by one question: how does one operate in a galaxy where humans intervene for loyalty, principle, and protection? Some counselors who had once dismissed Earth as a minor power realized that underestimating humans was no longer possible. The elder counselor from the ancient system spoke again, voice calm but heavy with authority. The humans have demonstrated something the galaxy rarely sees. They do not act recklessly, yet when they act, their reach is precise and their purpose undeniable. Their rule is not written in laws or decrees but in principle, and that principle will be followed everywhere. The Council's decisions reflected this new reality. Trade policies, defense strategies, and even cultural exchanges began to account for Earth's presence. Systems that had once ignored human influence now sought subtle alliances, hoping to remain in humanity's favor. Others acted with extreme caution, ensuring they would not provoke intervention. Meanwhile, Raltek continued to live quietly, though his life was far from ordinary. Human envoys visited regularly, offering guidance, technology, and subtle advice. They did not command or dominate, but their presence alone shaped the environment around him. Station security was quietly strengthened, and unknown observers sometimes lingered in the shadows. The galaxy had learned that protection could be both invisible and absolute. In the far reaches, the radical groups that had once considered themselves untouchable had been dismantled quietly. Their leaders had disappeared. Systems that had sheltered them distanced themselves, and every action they once considered safe now carried risk. They had learned the power of loyalty and the human principle. When someone acts for humanity, that act cannot be ignored. Trade and diplomacy adjusted. Traders moved cautiously. Alliances were built or avoided depending on whether humans were involved. Civilizations that once relied on fear or intimidation learned that their methods were no longer effective when humans acted subtly, decisively, and with principle. Raltek sometimes wondered at the quiet power that his single action had triggered. He had saved a life, an instinctive choice made without thought for fame, politics, or reward. Yet that choice had altered the entire galaxy's understanding of humanity. He realized that courage, when combined with loyalty, could ripple across light years, changing everything in ways no one could predict. Even the general citizens of various worlds began to recognize the new reality. Stories of the human response spread far and wide, reaching markets, schools, and public forums. People whispered about the invisible hand that could protect, influence, and neutralize threats without ever showing itself. The legend of one small alien saving a human became a symbol, not of fear but of a principle that demanded respect. Earth remained quiet publicly. There were no announcements of conquest or plans for domination, yet every action taken was deliberate, precise, and effective. The galaxy learned that the humans' patience was infinite, but their intervention was inevitable if loyalty or justice was at stake. For Raltek, the greatest lesson was simple. Courage and loyalty were not measured by strength or weapons, but by choices. Even the smallest act could have consequences far beyond what anyone could imagine. And those consequences could reshape entire civilizations, shift alliances, and create a new order in the galaxy. The new galactic rule was clear to all who understood. Act for humanity, and you are protected. Challenge them, or harm those who act for them, and the consequences will be swift, precise, and unavoidable. It was a rule not written in law but in action, and it was enforced silently yet universally. Raltek often walked through the quiet streets of the station at night, looking at the stars and reflecting on how a single choice had sparked such profound change. He felt small, almost insignificant, yet aware that his action had triggered something far greater than himself. One small gesture of courage had altered the galaxy's balance, teaching a lesson that would last generations. Across star systems, fleets continued to reposition, intelligence networks observed quietly, and alliances adjusted to the new reality. No one challenged humanity openly. No one dared. The principle was clear, and its enforcement had already been demonstrated. In the councils, leaders discussed policies in hushed tones. "We must consider every decision," one said. "Humans do not act for conquest but for principle. Yet principle can be unstoppable." Even ordinary citizens, traders, and travelers learned caution. Rumors spread of ships appearing without warning, threats neutralized before they could materialize, and lives protected invisibly. The galaxy understood that the invisible hand of humanity could move silently, yet its impact was absolute. Through it all, Raltek continued his daily work, repairing engines, selling parts, and greeting travelers. He remained humble, unaware that his choice had become a cornerstone of a new galactic order. He understood only this: doing what was right, even for a single moment, could change everything. And so a new rule governed the galaxy. Not written in treaties or decrees, but understood by all. Loyalty to humanity and the protection of those who acted for them was absolute. The galaxy had learned to respect the unseen, the quiet, and the principled. They had learned that courage and loyalty could ripple across systems, alter alliances, and create a new order without a single battle being fought openly. The humans had not declared war. They had not conquered. They had simply acted according to their principles. And in doing so, they created a force that no one could ignore, challenge, or underestimate. For Raltek, for the galaxy, and for history itself, one simple act had changed everything. And that change would endure for generations. The galaxy had a new rule, and it was clear to all. Humanity protected loyalty, honored courage, and acted with principle. Those who acted for humanity were safe. Those who ignored them were warned. And those who sought to challenge them quickly learned that patience, power, and principle could be the most formidable force in the universe. And with that, the universe settled into a new balance. A balance where courage and loyalty were honored above all. And the smallest act could ripple into the largest consequences. The story of one alien saving a human diplomat was no longer just a tale. It was the foundation of a new galactic rule, one that would be remembered, respected, and obeyed for centuries to come.